This video is my final one in looking at the 2018 Giant bike lineup. And by the way, I am doing something different with audio. I apologize for it being so bad in those first three. I don't know if it was the computer or the microphone or the recording software, but I'm doing something different, so hopefully this will be a lot better. This video I want to look at the stance, and I'm going to mention at the end of the video something about the rein that I want to clarify. So if you go to bikes and go to trail, the stance is a bike that I think is going to be a really great option for a lot of people who are wanting to get into full suspension bikes without spending a lot of money. And so I want to talk about this bike, and I didn't have time to do it in the other videos, so I'm making a separate one here. The first thing that I'll say is $1,500 is about as low as you want to go for a good quality full suspension mountain bike. Anything less than that, I recommend a hardtail. The bikes just get too heavy, the components are not durable. So I found that $1,500 is about the floor for a good full suspension bike. The other thing that I want to mention about these bikes is the fact that they come with a single pivot design as opposed to Giant's Maestro. So it's not going to have the characteristics that Maestro has, in the sense that braking is completely decoupled from the suspension. So a single pivot design it's a simpler design. There's less maintenance, there's less moving pivots. The downside is a single pivot can have what's called stink bugging, and that is when the rear brake is applied, the rear suspension kind of stiffens out, and that's especially problematic on a rough downhill. The other thing that can happen with a single pivot bike is the fact that when you pedal hard over obstacles and the suspension is trying to absorb it, sometimes the suspension will stiffen out a little bit with chain tension, and that also can be a little problematic if you're looking for traction when you're climbing. Now, I have not ridden a stance. I am using the knowledge that I have from years of understanding mountain bikes. The stance may filter that out a little bit, I don't know. But what I do know is that even a single pivot design is going to be much more comfortable, much more plush than a hardtail. So I would not have any issues getting on a bike like this with a single pivot. I think, again, this is a really great option for someone who doesn't want to spend a whole lot of money on a full suspension bike. So let's look at the Stance 1 first. And this bike has some really great component specs on it for the money. So the bike comes with SLX, which is, like I've mentioned before, a really good solid drivetrain, one that's going to be durable. It's fairly light, performs well. It comes with Fox suspension, and that is another nice thing. It comes with the rhythm damper on the front fork, and I have the rhythm damper fork on the mid-price Trance that I'm testing right now, and I like the damper a lot. It's infinitely adjustable, and I have not missed the Kashima coating that comes on the higher end Fox suspension. What's nice about this is its boost spacing, so it's going to be stiffer, and it also comes with the Cabolt. So the Cabolt is a through axle that does not have a quick release, but it's lighter. It's a little bit more of an expensive option, so it's nice that Giant put that on here. It also comes with tubeless wheels, which is another nice thing. So you got tubeless rims, and it comes with tubeless tires. It comes with the Maxxis Ardent tires. I've used Ardents before. They are a really nice rolling tire. They have good cornering grip and also some pretty low rolling resistance compared to the high rollers. So it's a good choice for this bike. What's also a nice spec on this is it comes with a 2.4 in the front and a 2.25 in the back. So you've got your cornering grip on the front tire, and the 2.25 in the back is going to make the bike a little bit more nimble and allow for a little bit better acceleration than having a big tire. I also want to mention that this bike is 120 millimeters of travel front and rear, which is a nice choice. So it kind of fits between a cross-country race bike and a full-on trail bike. And I think it's an amount of suspension that's going to fit a wide variety of riders, a wide variety of conditions. So it's going to be fairly plush, especially compared to a hardtail. And It's going to, just like I said, it's just a really good amount of travel for an all-around bike. It's not going to be too much bike for you for cross-country trails. It's not going to be able to handle the really rough, fast descents that you would do on a Trance or even a Rain. But for someone who just wants to trail ride, this is a great bike, and it's one that I can recommend by knowing these components, knowing the quality of the Giant frames. So looking at the stance too, you do drop down pretty significantly in your component group. So you go from a Fox fork to a Suntour. Never ridden a Suntour fork recently, so I don't know much about them, but I know they're not quite up there with Fox. Both of these bikes come with the Transex seat post, dropper seat post, which is nice. Dropper seat posts are pretty much standard now on trail bikes. I've used this exact brand on the Plus bike that I tested a few months ago, and it works very well. It's very smooth, so a nice spec. So you drop down to Deore components as opposed to SLX. I think you lose boost spacing. It doesn't say anything here in the specs about having boost spacing on the hubs. So if that's the case, then you're going to have a little bit more flex, so the bike is not going to be quite as precise as the higher end stance. So for an extra $600, I think you get a pretty decent upgrade in components. So my advice would be, if you can swing the extra $600, the Stance 1 I think is going to be the best value. Now I also want to mention the Anthem Aluminum. So let's look back over here at the cross-country bikes. And this Anthem Aluminum, let's filter just for 2018. This bike here is only about $500 more for the higher end one, and about $700 more for the lower end one compared to the stances. And so if it were me, so if I had $2,100 to spend, I would go for that stance because of the components versus this $2,200 Anthem 3. Now the nice thing about the Anthems though is that it does have the Maestro suspension, so the rear suspension is going to be, it's going to perform better. And also I want to mention that the Anthem has a little bit less travel in the back, so it's only 110 in the back, but it's 130 in the rear. The front. So the front with 130 is going to allow the bike to probably handle a little bit rougher terrain, because generally the front end is what takes the biggest hit on a bike as opposed to the rear, because typically you're standing up and letting the rear kind of bounce around. So if you can swing the $2,600 price tag versus the stance, I personally would go for this Anthem Aluminum. It's got pretty much the same component spec. So it's got the same fork, the Fox fork. They're both 27.5 wheel size, and you've got SLX, tubeless, a little bit different tire, but very similar component spec to that stance. Now that being said, you can't go wrong with either one. Both of these are great bikes. They fit a very similar type of terrain of riding. Let's look at the geometry, because that will vary a little bit. So on the Anthem 27.5, I can jump down here to the geometry. You've got a 16.9 inch chainstay and a 68-degree head angle. Let's look over at, and by the way, those are the main numbers that I look at. You can look at wheelbase and everything, but those are the main numbers that I look at. If I look back over here at the stance, let's check the geometry on this guy. And so the chainstay on this one is a little bit longer, so it won't be quite as snappy. And the head angle is also 68 degrees. So the chainstay is just a tad longer, which just means the bike is going to be a little bit more stable on descents, but not quite as snappy in the corners. It's not a big difference. That's not a huge number difference. So again, you cannot go wrong with either of these. They're both very similar. And so I just wanted to mention that. The last thing that I'll mention in this video is I want to clarify something that I said about the Rain. Now, I had mentioned, I kind of made it sound like the Rain is mainly a downhill bike. Well, it's not. The Glory is Giant's downhill bike. You know, and a downhill bike, you really need to shuttle to the top or walk your bike or pedal very slowly. The Rain is designed to be a trail bike, so it is one that can be pedaled to, you know, the climb you want to do, or, you know, if you're doing an enduro race, you can pedal, you know, to your next starting point. So it's a pedalable bike. And I've owned a Rain in the past, but the Rain that I owned several years ago had 150 millimeters of travel front and rear, whereas these newer Rains bump up the travel by about 10 millimeters, so they're 160 front and rear. So the purpose, the reason I said that is because someone who's kind of looking at getting into trail riding, if you jumped up to a Rain without really understanding what you're getting, I think you're going to be overbiked. If you're looking at a Rain, you know what you want. You know that you're the type of rider that will use this bike. If you ride, you know, like in Arizona or Colorado, where you can get some really nasty, chunky stuff, you're dropping off stuff, you know, 3, 5, 6 foot drops or more, then you're going to want a Rain. But the point is, if you're just wanting to do all-day trail rides, just pedal all over the place, the Rain is too much bike for that. It's for someone who's really focused on riding the downhills, but yet you still want kind of a trail bike that you can pedal around. And so if your main focus is the descents, then yes, the Rain is the way to go. So I just wanted to clarify that. So that'll wrap up this final video in my 2018 Giant bike lineup. As always, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and drop them below. And if these videos are helpful for you, despite the bad audio in the first 3, go ahead and give a thumbs up for them if you don't mind. Thanks for watching.